Streaming live via the internet. Welcome to ISP Radio, your weekly source for ISP-related news, events, and interviews with industry experts. If you deliver internet via fiber optic, wireless, coax, or any other way, you're in the right place. Chat live with us weekly via ispradio.com every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And now a brief word from our sponsors. Link Technology, providing ISP consulting, support, and hardware for wireless ISPs. TowerCoverage.com, providing online RF coverage maps. Mimosa Networks, providing high-density, high-bandwidth radio products. Advanced LLC, providing retail and wholesale advanced communication services by matching providers with your bandwidth needs. And by Sitel, providing reliability in surge suppression. And now your host for ISP Radio, Steve Grabiel and Dennis Burgess.
Welcome to another edition of ISP Radio. I'm your host, Steve Grabiel, broadcasting from Moriarty, New Mexico. And on the other line is Dennis. He's producing the show and co-hosting the show from Missouri. Dennis, you there?
I'm here.
Sweet. Well, we started off a little bit late trying to work through some technical difficulties with the new Google Hangout thing, and it just didn't seem to work today. So we're back to good old reliable Skype. Seems to work pretty well. What say you, Dennis?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's just differences in the way things work sometimes. And, it's all good. There's not a big problem with it. We'll just have to continue to work on it, and we'll get her up and running as quickly as possible, as always. Yeah, this new format's going to really be beneficial to us as well as you, the listener, to see what's going on with the video. We've had a few test runs of it, and it seemed to work pretty well. Just hammering out the problems, and Dennis is the guru that knows how to make that work. So I really appreciate Dennis taking the lead with this. So what's been going on out here? Not much. My weekend was ruined by some peer-to-peer activity, and I'd like to touch base with Dennis and see the guru on how to identify and suppress. And also, recently, Windows 10 was just recently released, and I put it on my laptop. It's interesting. It's I think better than Windows 8, but that's my opinion. And I have, like I always have to do whenever they release something new, I got to go buy the latest computer so I can talk people through their problems, because if I'm operating on a Windows 7 machine, it makes it impossible to help step clients through their own problems when they have something different, which leads me to believe I'm going to have to purchase a Mac. Oh, God. Anyways. No Mac. Any news out there recently, Dennis, that is affecting our community? Well, right now we don't have a whole terribly lot going on again in the WISPA and the wireless ISP community. We do see a number of products. We had the Mimosa firmware update for the B5, B5C products. That definitely has helped out many people. We've had pluses, lots of pluses come from that. Link Technologies going on with us. We have the HS Network Manager, which is a hotspot radius platform. Does hotspot billing as well as advertising campaigns, things like that. Definitely starting to, it's definitely selling quite a bit. Lots of people like it. What's really nice is that it's a fairly low cost overall. You can upgrade your licensing as needed, and there's no continual support. In other words, it's not like they get 10% or a lot of hotspot systems 40 or 60% of your income on it. So that's always good. They just recently added a number of great new features, including authorized.net support. So that's always, of course, really, really good. Lots of people looking at that and working with that as well. WISPApalooza still around the corner, October 10th through the 17th. Again, the sponsor, the sessions, they did update the session website. So we have everything from Spectrum update, of course. We have network documentation and standards, federal forms. What should you be doing? That's probably going to be a great session that a lot of people need to attend. We're going to be talking about preparing to sell your WISP in those sessions as well. We have some fiber boot camps. We have non-line of sight communications, employee handbooks, strategic planning. I'm just kind of going through this. All this is available at wispa.org as well. basic routing, site management, and tower space, conducting interviews, Connect America Fund. So if you're interested in the Connect America Fund, there will be a session on that. We're going to talk about VLANs, insurances, what type of insurance you need, hosted PBXs and VoIP, very good stuff as well. And, of course, hiring do's and don'ts. The art of selling. There's definitely an art to selling, so that should be a good one. Nuts and bolts of finances, service offerings, and how to choose your speed packages. BGP, using partners to market your company in referral programs. Billing best practices, VoIPs from the regulatory side, dealing with end-user problems with home networks. Inventory management, E-rate in Lifeline. So if you're interested in that, again, that's other government programs. LTE deployments, IP2v6, straight from Aaron. I do believe Aaron will have, it's either a CEO or the gentleman that was on our show, the CTO, will be there as well. So there's lots and lots of great sessions. You do need to be there to attend these sessions. The sessions, to my knowledge, will not be recorded, so you need to make sure you get there so that you can take a look at this. These people are experts in our field. There's lots of great people out there, and the agenda committee has done a great job of putting this together, and I'm sure this will change slightly. There is up to 5 sessions going on at once this year. So make sure you plan ahead and know who and what needs to go where. There are discounts available for all of your attendees, so make sure you get in there. And as you go up in the number of attendees, there's discounts available. As I said, definitely go to wispa.org. If you have not done so, register. And you can also click there to secure your room as well. So you need to do both. You need to register for the event, and then you will need to secure your room. They have rooms at $105 at the Rio this year, so really good price, right on the Strip. Can't miss it. Again, wispa.org for that. Other news, let's see here. What else? There's really not a whole lot else going on. The FCC committee has been busy. If you are in with them, it's mostly stuff as it pertains to the open internet order and small service provider exemptions. So again, if you're not involved with that, this month we do have the new members of the WISPA board joining us, so that should be good. New blood is always a good thing. Other than that, there's, again, not a whole lot going on. For those of you that don't know, Form 477 is due. You need to get it in. There are many different WISPA vendor members that are available. Obviously, Link Technologies, a platinum sponsor here at ISP Radio, can help you with both your census block data, your broadband deployment, and your broadband subscriber if you do not have an application that already does that. So that is coming up. I believe it's due at the beginning of September, so the end of August. Form 477, you are required to fill that out as a fixed wireless provider. Make sure you get on that. That's about it, man. I know you had some stuff that we wanted to talk about.
Right. Well, I wanted to follow up with that. In past WISPALOOZAs, there's been some microtik training. Is there going to be some microtik training offered at WISPALOOZA this year as well?
There's a whole bunch of training that's offered before and after the event. You can go in there into the wispa.org and hit the co-located training and events. I know there is Ingenious Programs is in there. I believe there's a couple Ubiquities. I believe there's some Microtech, some Cambium, Freeside, Radwin, more Ubiquity, PMP 450, more Ubiquity. So there's a number of training partners there that will be before and after the event, and all of that information is listed on, again, wispa.org. Click the WISPAPalooza link in the co-located training events page.
Right. Cool. Well, recently over the weekend, I downloaded Windows 10, and like I said, it seems to be all right, not too different from what I had before, and it seems to run pretty snappy here. Didn't lose a lot of functionality after Windows 8. What I like about it is the new start button. It's finally there, and I can power it on the machine from the start button. The simple things in life. I guess my question, Dennis, is when you download a Windows 10 product, and this segues into my other question and concern that I had over the weekend, when you download this, is it a one-to-one connection, or are you using a peer-to-peer connection to download this? Do you know?
So the answer to that question is I have not taken an actual look at that. My assumption is that Microsoft, not only using CDN networks, but also using their extensive global network, I guarantee you it's probably a pretty one-to-one. It's probably not peer-to-peer. Don't quote me on that, though, because I have not sat there and watched it as well. So I can't sit there and say that. I will tell you right now that a lot of people are downloading the ISO or making a flash media. There's definitely licensing changes with Windows 10. There's definitely some not necessarily weirdness, but things you need to know about the licensing stuff. But other than that, it's so far been proven to be so far pretty reliable on the systems that we have.
Mm-hmm. So you have some experience with Windows 10. You've been playing around with it?
Oh yeah. I definitely I seen the Windows 10 and the pre-beta, that type of stuff, in VMware, that type of stuff, virtual environments, and of course whenever it came out, I'm like, yeah, let's go ahead and upgrade my machine. So far, no major issues. The downside is this. One particular licensing thing is if you have a Windows 7 or Windows 8 machine and you upgrade it, there's no big deal. The Windows 8 license is actually generated based on your hardware, okay? And what's nifty is Windows 8 will go out, let's say you reload that machine again with Windows 8, fresh load. When Windows 8 loads up, it'll actually sit there and go out to Microsoft and go, okay, the hardware matches, so here's your license. All is good. You don't even have to, that's kind of part of the activation process. But you don't really have to have a key for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a Windows 8 key and you just do a fresh load, it doesn't take that key on the fresh load because it wants to do an upgrade. Now, once you do an upgrade, Windows 8 will do the licensing. In other words, it looks at your hardware and puts that information into Microsoft and says, this hardware has been allocated this license. And then if you reload it again, it'll be fine. But the first time you have to do that upgrade. So kind of important to note, you can't just take Windows 10, download the ISO, and do a blank install from a Windows 7 or Windows 8 machine and expect your license to go. It doesn't work that way. You have to do the upgrade first. Once the upgrade is done, then you can go ahead and it's activated. Then you can go ahead and do a fresh install and it'll be fine.
That's a good trick to know, is that basically, from what I'm understanding, you can't download the image and just drop it on any old machine. You have to have Windows 8 or 7
and do your upgrade. Well, I mean, you can buy a Windows 10 license. You know what I'm saying? But you can't just drop the Windows 10. You can't take a Windows 7 or Windows 8 machine, download the ISO, and just do a fresh install without upgrading the 7 or 8 to Windows 10 first. If you do the fresh install, it'll just sit there going, oh, you're unlicensed. And you can't just put in your old license key either. It doesn't work. It won't accept a Windows 7 or Windows 8 license key. But, right. But once you've upgraded, so if you have a Windows 7 or 8 machine and you upgrade it to 10 and it's been activated, now Microsoft knows what hardware you had and it allocates a license to you. Okay, so then if you took a flash drive or CD or DVD and pop it in there and do a fresh install, instead of activating or getting a product code, it will just activate. It'll look at your hardware and go, oh, it's the same hardware, so it's activated.
Gotcha. That's valuable information.
Now, downside of this is that now Microsoft is looking at the components and hardware that's in your gear. Basically, they're really looking at the motherboard for the most part. Let's say you decide to upgrade your machine and put a new motherboard in. That's a new Windows license. So keep that in mind, is that you just can't swap out the motherboard and be happy.
Right. You'd have to purchase a whole new license, correct?
Correct.
Gotcha. Well, hey, that's valuable information on this upgrade that was just released. And I've got some clients who told me they downloaded the image, if you will, or ISO image, and they want to hold off and wait till later to drop that new image on there. And according to what you're saying, is that will not work. They'll have to buy a new license. Gotcha.
Well, they can drop it in there, but what they'll have to do is they'll have to upgrade first.
Right.
So, and I mean, that's fine. I mean, you upgrade from Windows 7 or 8, and now you're at Windows 10, but now you go, I want a fresh load. Well, it's been activated. Now you can use that flash driver or ISO into a fresh load.
Right. That's, like I said, valuable information, I'm sure, for everyone, because I had no idea about that. When I did this on my laptop here, I just upgraded it. I didn't flash it or anything like that. And it took the upgrade. It didn't take too long, about half hour.
Yeah, I mean, it really isn't a bad thing. I will note that I seen a person, it was a video on an old, I think it was an Acer laptop. And we're talking like an Atom 1.6 gig or 1.2 gig processor, a fairly old laptop, actually install Windows 10 on it. And for the most part, other than the first boot time of it being about 60, 70 seconds, it actually performed pretty dang good. So we're definitely seeing a lot better performance out of Windows 10. So,
oh, good.
The time will tell if people like it. Having the start menu, very, very important.
Yeah, no, you take that away, it killed a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
And then the tile idea, I didn't care for that much myself.
Yeah.
So, anyways, over the weekend, and this has been propagating itself for a while until I caught it. Had some people doing peer-to-peer activity, particularly a product called PrimeWire, and it brought my network to its knees. One client was flooding the network with 2,000 connections using that PrimeWire, and then off of the same relay, I had two other people doing something similar. And we've all talked about peer-to-peer. We all know what it does and how devastating it is to a network. I just would like to solicit you, Dennis, for your professional advice and opinion on how to identify this new peer-to-peer, because it's all encrypted and we can't see it, but we can sure see connections. Are there other ways of identifying potential peer-to-peer traffic on your network that may be causing you grief? I mean, I lost a client over it, and threats of other people quitting as well over the people installing stuff that they don't know what they're installing and causing damage to the network. Any advice on how to identify and then within I use a MikroTik, but with other products, is there a way to identify that kind of stuff and suppress it?
Well, this is actually a really, really good question, because it kind of blends into a number of areas. So let's kind of start at the beginning. So the very first thing is, why does a peer-to-peer application, etc., actually affect a network in some way or shape or fashion? In general, the answer is it shouldn't. Okay, now we have to talk about different technologies here, so don't think I'm going to exclude anybody here. But under normal operations, let's say you have a cable connection or DSL connection or a fiber connection, you typically don't have much issues with peer-to-peer on those styles of networks. And the reason for that is because those styles of networks usually have high-end, high-capacity routers and switches, okay? And there's not much else to have problems inside that. Maybe a DSL modem has a packet per second limit, but usually they're pretty high, and most of those types of devices are fairly robust, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The issue that comes in is, why does peer-to-peer affect wireless users or fixed wireless more than other things? The very simple fact is that we have a half duplex medium. And this is really the big thing. In our wireless gear, all of our wireless gear is half duplex. The AP talks, the CPEs talk. And then on top of that, you have a whole bunch of CPEs talking to the AP. Okay? So in actuality, whenever you really look at it, you have many CPEs taking turns talking. If you're using Ubiquiti or any other TDMA product or non-TDMA product, this is how it works. And they all try to talk, and they sense, hey, can I talk? Or they have if it's TDMA, they have a time schedule. I know exactly when I can talk. The problem is that whenever you get peer-to-peer applications, instead of having one connection or two connections open that are large packets and that are moving data very efficiently, we get many, many thousands of connections in some cases to many different sources, and those packets may not be large. So think of it this way. If you have a 20 meg internet connection and you click on a download, let's say the Windows 10 ISO would be a good example. You're probably connecting to one location and downloading that very, very fast. and all of your packets are basically 1500 byte packets. So your packet count is not really high. Okay. Now we go to the flip side. We go to peer-to-peer. What we actually have is 2,000 or 1,000 or 5,000 connections. And each one of those connections is moving 20, 30K, 40K, maybe even a meg, maybe a half meg. We don't know. It could be all over the place. But now you have a whole bunch of connections trying to compete on the same physical space. So say 20 meg. And let's just say you have 1,000 connections out there. And out of those 1,000 connections, 500 can deliver your full 20 meg. Now they're all fighting for TCP preference. So what happens is as data flows, data starts ramping up. This is how TCP works. It starts ramping up speed. As soon as we start getting packet loss or any type of latencies, all of a sudden TCP backs off its speed. Okay. But now you have 800 or 500 connections all doing that simultaneously. And now you don't have these large packets. Now you're getting smaller and smaller packets. So what ends up happening is you get a huge packets per second count. Now, when we look at products such as Ubiquiti, Bitlomat, and other manufacturers, I don't want to single anybody out here by any means, but any of these manufacturers, and Microtech would be included in this, we have limits on the number of packets per second that we can do. On top of that, more packets per second taxes whatever protocol you're using over the wireless medium. So it doesn't matter if it's AirMax, which is TDMA, or NV2, which is again TDMA, or Mimosa's proprietary protocol. It doesn't matter. All these proprietary protocols, they still have a certain time span, TDMA, time division multiplex. Okay, but instead of us trying to get 5 large packets out in the time frame, they have to get 500 small packets. Each small packet has additional overhead. So instead of you having 5 large packets with 40 bytes of, or up to 40 bytes of header information, now you have 500 packets, each with 40 bytes or up to 40 bytes of header information. So when we look at the technical reasons for this, all of a sudden we have a lot of additional overhead, both in routing and packet processing on a per packet basis, that really slows down the overall performance of your wireless network. And that's really what gets you on the wireless side. Now, this would be similar to many other systems, even LTE. LTE may be able to handle that a little better, but until we really get a true full duplex upstream and downstream, we're not really going to see a much better performance improvement. So this is why peer-to-peer or these types of applications are not necessarily harmful, but do not play well with other applications on the same access point. So in your case, I'm sure you had a number of people trying to do many connections, all probably on the same AP, and this AP simply gets overloaded with the number of either packets per second, and or what happens is the scheduler tries to schedule more airtime for those guys because of the number of packets per second, starving other users on that access point. Okay.
So the AP is focusing in on those ones that are trying to push those many connections over legitimate larger packet sizes. Well, to me, it sounds like death by 1,000 cuts.
Well, you're right. It's not really the larger packet size. It's really just this packet count.
Right.
You know, to the radios, they're just packets.
It's packets per second that a AP can handle, correct?
Right. Well, that is true. But to the AP, it's just packets. And when we look at that, the AP goes, okay, well, XYZ, customer A needs 2,000 packets to send. Customer B needs 30 packets to send. Which one's going to get more airtime?
Right.
It doesn't really matter the size of the packets. It's just looking at it's the number of packets. And overall, on a wireless network, it just dramatically affects or can dramatically affect the overall performance. Now, when we look at point-to-points, backhauls, licensed radios, things like that, all of a sudden, peer-to-peer, the major effects of peer-to-peer go away because the radios, even being half duplex, is just simply transmitting more packets to the same client. The big thing really comes into your last mile, which is your point to multi-point system. That's really where all of a sudden the AP is starved for time to send data to all clients in an effective manner.
Right.
Now, when we look at other protocols, and I'm just going to go over to Canopy, or well, I shouldn't say Canopy, Cambium, in its various products. There are quality of services and things like that. Some of those more proprietary systems will handle those types of packets a little better because it knows how much bandwidth it needs to schedule. And even though it's dividing that up by bandwidth and by time, it has a little bit more, not necessarily intelligence, but it has more control over the time slots that are given to every person. Whereas your other systems may not have as advanced time slotting.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it is what it is. Now, so let's go back to our second topic. So the first topic is, why does it actually affect a wireless network in such a way?
Right.
So what can we do about it?
Okay. Well, no, first off, how do you identify the traffic so you can mitigate it?
Well, that's a good question. First off, a lot of these systems are starting to come by default with encryption enabled. That doesn't mean that all your packets are encrypted, not by any means. But it does mean that there is a significant amount of packets that are encrypted. So we can't rely on things like layer 7 filters to properly detect that this connection is a peer-to-peer. Now, Microtech, in our case, has built-in layer 7 high-capacity peer-to-peer filters. They do work in some instances, but if you turn on encryption, for the most part, it doesn't see them. And that's the whole point of running encryption. Imagine that. So that method is definitely falling by the wayside. Now, you could sit there and take an example of XYZ user and say, hey, I seen a peer-to-peer connection, so I'm going to assume now all of his connections are peer-to-peer and slow them down. But that's not really too good either. So now you're catching live traffic and it's false positives. Makes sense? So in reality, the only thing you can really do is two things. One, limit the number of connections that they can actually form. Now, this can cause other issues. Let's say you limit them to 100 for a residential user. Well, what happens whenever Johnny, the kid, starts a BitTorrent download, whether it be legal or non-legal, doesn't matter, starts the download and eats up 100 connections. Now, that download is still going to run, and it's going to run as fast as 100 connections. Now, note, if he happens to get connections that are capable of delivering his full bandwidth, then he will. And that's a good thing. Okay, that's not a bad thing because now you're having the BitTorrent work, but now you're using less connections, less packets per second, and those connections are more efficient because we can send faster. They can receive faster on each one. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one way. But whenever we do that, what happens when mom opens up her iPad and tries to get to her email? No more connections allowed. They can't get anywhere. That's a problem. That's a mom calling you going, hey, I can't get my internet. And you go, well, you're maxed out of bandwidth and you're maxed out in your number of connections right now. So that's an issue. Okay. There are ways around that. You can try to exclude certain types of traffic, maybe exclude not Winbox, but exclude your web traffic and your HTTPS traffic, your secure web traffic, and maybe your certain email ports. So you can exclude certain things like that and either allow them to run or allow them to run at a higher connection limit count. Okay. So another good example would be maybe port 80 and port 443 would be at 100 connections by themselves, but everything else is just 100 connections. So you have two limits. Now, the problem with that going further is that a lot of peer-to-peer applications are now going, hey, I can get connections on port 80 and I can get connections on port 443. They're not blocked. So let's do that. Make sense? So now all of a sudden, we see BitTorrent and other types of peer-to-peer traffic running on other ports. Remember, the the internet does not have to run on port 80. We have web servers that run on port 8181 for whatever reason. Okay, it's just a port number. It's just common that it's on port 80. Now we have peer-to-peer applications running, and the same thing could occur. Another thing that is probably a little bit better is to come up with a scheme. And while I'm not going to say if I have one or not, but come up with a scheme to sit there and go, okay, if a user is doing a legitimate download with, say, 1 or 2 connections, and they're moving their full bandwidth speed, what is the actual packets per second that they need per megabit? Okay, so think about that. If you say, hey, I have a 5 meg connection and I want to run a full board, what is the maximum number of packets per second that I should be able to use for 5 meg, assuming a very efficient packet scheduler? Okay, in other words, instead of small packets, they're mostly big packets.
Right.
Okay. Now you have to add in a little header and a little overages and things like that. Okay. But now you come up to a number. I'm not just going to throw a number out, and I'm not going to say this is valid for 5 meg or anything, but I'm just going to say 500 packets a second. Okay. Or per second. I should rephrase that. So the question now comes in, can we limit each of these IPs to a very specific amount of packets per second? Okay, and let those applications fight over the packets per second. That completely eliminates our BitTorrent issue because, yes, they can open up 1,000 connections, but we're only going to let so many packets through. So having many connections is going to be very inefficient. Therefore, you're not going to get a lot of packets through. But then you go back to the same old issue. What happens whenever Johnny's doing something and mom doesn't and can't get on, or dad can't get on to update his stocks, etc.? So we come into this conundrum, and what we see some people do is that we manage the inside of the network as well as the outside. Okay, now what do I mean by that? The CPE has some type of intelligence that allows us to say, hey, CPE, you get 5 meg down, 2 meg up, or 20 meg down and 5 up. And on the inside, we have a whole bunch of IPs, and I want you to give fair queuing to all the IPs so that nobody gets an overabundance of data. Now, if you did this on a packet per second layer, again, this would allow Johnny to do his BitTorrent, but whenever Johnny tried to open his web page, it'd be slow, but mom could go open up her iPad and it'd come right up. So we have these conundrums of how to handle this. And there are pluses and minuses both ways, and it really depends on your users. So here's a third aspect that you have to look at. What if you have a business customer? Now you have 200 computers behind a single IP. Well, you can't just limit it to 100 connections because that'll never even work even on port 80. So you have to assume that you may have multiple tiers of limiting like that. All of these things are just ways to help limit the overall performance and the hopefully not affect those performance metrics that your clients want. So, the real question is what do we do? What do we do about it? And the answer is there's no one solution fits all. I have some customers that do the per packet limits. I have some customers that do the connection limits. I think the connection limit's probably the simplest way of going. Another way is to say, hey, we're going to set a high number of connections. And once that limit's been reached, then, hey, we're really going to restrict them for 4 hours for whatever reason. I've seen that as well. The very last aspect I'd like to talk about as it pertains to this is coming into the aspect of open internet. What is reasonable network management? Now, the FCC has redefined that as something that a business practice is not affecting the traffic. In other words, you're not changing the traffic because it is in the business best interest. In other words, you're not stopping VoIP packets that aren't going to your VoIP platform. That would be a business decision, okay? But technical reasons such as this should be allowed. We're technically seeing that this is happening, so we need to prevent it. So again, you just have to, go through the whole thing, go through the whole process, and really look at it. I don't think there's a one size fits all for every network.
Right. No. Well, on my network, what I do, and through your suggestion, is I limit packets, and I'm doing it out at the edge, and that seems to work. But like you said, if there's 5 computers online, 100 connections is going to shut someone down. So that's kind of bad, but it also prevents, I drop the packets in excess of whatever, and I just deal with it. Like I said, it sounds like there's multiple solutions to this problem. In my particular instance, I had this access point was a Ubiquity product, Rocket, with a sector. And what I had to do is every client off the sector is a nano beam or nano bridge 5. And what I had to do is shut off individual people's LANs to root out who was doing it. And then also looking at my microtik to see who was flooding the network. Those are 2 ways I was able to identify this kind of bad traffic. I guess my question is, in Ubiquity, is there a way to see those kind of packets, or is it within the microtik that I'm able to do that? Because
I don't think I don't think what's the word? Ubiquity has any type of product or any type of system, especially in the AP, that would limit that. Don't quote me, obviously.
Right.
But I don't think they do.
I think the only traffic shaping they have is, actual speed that the LAN will hand out, if you will.
Correct.
But that's how I identified these problems, a combination of shutting off local area networks on these nano bridges and just pinging to the AP. What I was seeing is I would shut off someone and I'd be pinging the access point from an upstream router, not the actual router, because I was getting flawless pinging from the actual router connected to the AP was flawless. But when I went one board upstream and was pinging that AP, I'd get 10 good packets and then 10 timeouts. And what I ended up doing was looking at my connections and seeing who was doing it, and then I would shut them off and see if the performance picked up, and it surely did. It's just a way I used. Is that pretty common, Dennis?
Oh yeah. I mean, you're going to have to do something to help out, and you just have to identify it. I mean, there are ways with microtik that you can sit there and not do anything and just identify it. So you can say, hey, if they go over 100 connections, add them to a list. So I know this IP did, and maybe it's only for an hour or two, but then you add them to a list and then it does nothing else, just to give you some information on that. But then again, maybe you can do something based on that. Maybe go, hey, this person is definitely doing more connections than I think they should. So instead of me limiting by bandwidth, let me limit them by packets per second for the next 2 hours.
Gotcha.
That's definitely a way. And I'm just going to toss this out there. I mean, when we look at the bits per second to PPS conversion, I mean, there are converters out there, and I'm just going to make sure I tell everybody. An example would be a 10 meg connection would be about 1,600 packets per second. Now, that's assuming a smaller than 1,500 byte packet. So that's fairly efficient. But if we say 1,500, it's only about 870 packets a second. Okay? So you can't sit there and assume best case scenario, because what if they have VoIP? What if they have some other things that don't eat the bandwidth but does eat packets per second? So what we find on average, and this is I'm not going to say it's a mission critical number or a proprietary number, but on many networks, I have found about 812 byte packets is about the average packet size that we get.
Right.
I'm not saying that it is all the time, but that's about average. And if you use that with 10 meg, that's about 1,600 packets per second on a 10 meg circuit, or to get 10 meg. So that would be a high number for a 10 meg circuit that you could put in there, and that would probably be fairly legitimate. But, again, this all goes back to another issue, which is that open internet order. If we're modifying or let's try this again, prioritizing traffic without the customer's knowledge, especially, is that legal or not? And we just don't know yet. We don't know if it is or not. And it's an iffy question right now. Eventually, it's going to come up and go there. And actually, that brings us to another topic, since we've been talking about that, is the FCC Open Internet Order, in specifically the FCC Complaint Department. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
So the FCC has a way you can go to their website. It's actually quite comical. You can go to the FCC's website and do a net neutrality complaint. Basically, it's for the Open Internet Orders, and there have in the first month that's been running, there's over 2,000 complaints. I really find this hilarious, and I'm gonna complain. One of the very first things we find is a lot of the people that submit the complaint is not the actual owner of the circuit. So that's actually or the connection. So that's actually one big thing. The FCC is taking this complaint, and they're sending a letter. They're mailing a letter to the ISP. Believe this or not, okay? They're filing a complaint online, but yet they're mailing a letter. And then after they responded to that, they'll mail a letter to you providing that response. It just blows my mind that is not all done via email or via the website. Mm-hmm. Insane. But there's a number of places, if you go online and type first net neutrality complaints, things like that, you're going to read some of these, and they are really, really dumb. is what I'm going to say. Just straight up people saying, oh, it doesn't work. Oh, it hasn't worked for a week, but yet I'm using it right now to file this. I like that one. Exactly. There's lots of things, and a lot of the complaints are probably perfectly legitimate. Maybe they're not. I don't know, but anybody can do this, and you as an ISP are gonna you might as well start creating a process for, as you as an ISP, you ought to start creating a formal process so that you can handle these. Okay, because you're going to get one eventually. Everybody's going to get one eventually. It's just a matter of time. Know what I'm saying?
And we are forced to respond?
The answer is yes, we should be responding.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, we should be responding, but it's like DCMA notices behind a double-natted network. Nothing I can do.
Right. And like I said, I think you can respond online as well, but I'm just making sure I tell everybody that, hey, you might want to be aware that you're going to get some of these eventually. Mm-hmm. And just be aware that whenever you get it, that you have a policy and a procedure so that you can get in there and respond to them in a proper manner. It's just, think of it as like a Better Business Bureau complaint, because that's really what it can be.
Exactly.
And such. So just keep that in mind.
Instead of the free market capitalistic society using the Better Business Bureau to respond, now we're forced to respond to the government.
Yep. Well, and to the customer. I mean, keep that in mind. But just remember that it's a system that you're gonna need to be able to handle. That's all.
Right. Well, how I dealt with the situation that I went through, and like I said, I lost a client over it, and threats of other people leaving. I rooted out the problem. I called up the client and I said, look, there's something coming from your address that is destroying your connection and everyone else's connection. And, one of the people, she sat down and looked at her daughter's computer and found this primeware. So she got rid of it, and that seemed to mitigate the problems coming from her IP address. And then another client I talked to, they're looking into it with my advice of what to look for. And another one is a proposed technical guru that says there's nothing on my stuff doing this, and I have to beg to differ. You can think that you're a technical guru, but if you're causing the stuff, then there's something going on there, and that's kind of how I deal with it. I mean, is that being a consultant and dealing with a bunch of other ISPs? Are you hearing that's a lot of what other people do too?
That's a lot. They turn them off and they say, hey, you're causing network issues. This isn't fiber. This isn't, other type. We have certain limitations. And because of that, we've turned you off until you can resolve the problem. And we see that with other larger ISPs as well, where they just turn you off and say, hey, you need to resolve it. I do know there's some other things you can do. I had this is a solution that I came up with for another particular client, in which when we detect various activities, okay, and it can be peer-to-peer, but specifically a stupid high amount of connections, there's actually, I think, 2 different things that need to occur. And if both of those occur, we actually put the customer into what we call a penalty box, okay? And what happens is our routers basically start blocking all traffic to and from that client, okay? But if they open up a web page, at least a non-secure web page, they get redirected immediately, and they can only go to one page. They can only go to this one site, and they see, we're sorry, we have detected, illegal or activity that is detrimental to the network and other customers. Because of that, we have turned off your general internet access. If you think this is an error, please call us at this number. You will if this activity ceases within after 2 hours, you will automatically be removed, and you'll be able to get right back on. But if the activity persists, you will you will stay in this list. You see, you stay in the penalty box until it's off. And what we found was that we had to, in their case, we had to play with those numbers a little bit, the connections and things like that, to prevent false positives.
Right.
Matter of fact, we wanted to basically say they had to really do something to do that. And if you said 6,000 connections per IP, I think that would probably be in there. You know what I'm saying? But and they were definitely a lot lower than that. But the example being is, hey, we've detected this. We know it's going to be bad for our network, so we stopped it. End of story. We've stopped it. You can't get internet service. But if you wait 2 hours, so if it happens on the weekend, you wait 2 hours, they'll come back on. If it doesn't stop, then you'll stay in there until you call in, and then we can look at it and we can go, okay, yeah, I see, 4,000 connections being attempted, and that's why. So you need to find that. I'll be glad to remove you real quick here, but if that comes right, if it's still on there, you'll just be added again.
Right. So it's an actual automated response instead of me having to call them.
Right. Well, it's more along the lines of, hey, we're going to put you in this penalty box. We're going to put you into hey, you're doing a bad thing that affects our network. We're going to stop that bad thing, and we're going to stop your internet, but we're going to inform you in an automatic way. Okay. And then because of that, maybe an alert gets sent. We actually talked about this, and I don't think we ever implemented it with my particular customer, but we could definitely send an email to the network operations team or your support people going, hey, this person's been put into the penalty box.
Right.
The problem is that there are a number of people that sometimes they'll get added, and then they realize what they did, and then they never call in, and they just wait, and then they go out. You see what I'm saying? And they're happy. But the ideal is that, hey, if they're not doing the traffic, we want to pull them out.
Right. And, as an ISP, my number one job is to ensure connectivity to the internet. Number 2 is, of course, speed. And then number 3 is protect the network. And these harmful things destroy network connection and prevent me from doing my main job.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it is, man. That's the way it is.
Yeah. Well, if you got anything else, Dennis, on this topic, I mean, you pretty much, I really appreciate it, explaining peer-to-peer in a layman's terms for simple guys like me about, packets per second and number of connections and how to mitigate stuff. Within MikroTik, it's pretty easy to isolate, not based on number of connections. You can just take a look at it. And I don't know if any other routing products out there do as such, but MikroTik's pretty good at that. And thanks for explaining why in a half duplex world this just doesn't work as well as it should.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I point this out, is that there are definitely other products out there that do these types of things, okay? And some of these other products out there, and I know of a number of them, they have years and years of experience specifically trying to prevent the things that you have mentioned. And they have created their own system. And part of the cost that you are buying their product for, or buying their support or their updates, whatever that may be, is that knowledge. In other words, the system you don't build. Microtech always has this, you know, so the best thing about Microtech is that it does everything. The worst thing about Microtech is that it does everything. The problem is that you have to build it. You have to tell it what you want it to do, and you have to build a, quote, system, or you have to use multiple facilities inside Router OS to make it do what you want it to do. Whereas there are other systems that they've, based on years and years of experience, say this is the way it's going to be done because this is the way we feel is the best way. And I'm not sitting there saying that that's bad or good. I'm just pointing out that a lot of the other systems do it that way. So there's not a whole lot of fudging or a lot of playing with numbers that fit your needs. Hopefully their platform will fit right in there. You see what I'm saying? But I'm just pointing out that there's definitely other systems. I believe there's some other WISPA vendor members that do this as well. So I don't want to sit there and say Microtech's the only way of doing it. I know you can do it with Microtech. I know there's many different paths you can take, different ways of skinning the cat, as they say.
Right.
But
it's all within firewalling, correct?
Well, I mean, there's a number of different places you can do it, but the point being, though, is that is it is a technical decision based on your network, how you wish to detect it, how you wish to handle it once it's detected, and then go from there. In your case, you had no way to automatically detect it. Therefore, you detected it with you going and turning off customers. And then how do you deal with it? Well, you turn them off and you called them up. So if that's the way you want to handle it, then great. Not a problem. Makes sense?
Yeah,
but it
absolutely.
may not be. It may not be. If you think that this is an isolated event, then you may not want to put any more time into it. You see what I'm saying? Whereas you may go, as my network's growing larger, how can I prevent problems before they occur? And this goes back to this issue of how do we handle things proactively versus reactively. A lot of businesses operate, especially smaller ISPs, they operate reactively. They don't put any forethought into what ifs. Okay. My background originally comes from Microsoft, Novell NetWare, things like that. And in the enterprise market, my job was I'm one person. It's me, and I had a technician, a computer tech underneath me, 2 people, and we had 450 computers across 3 states in 12 sites. Okay, one of my very first consulting jobs. Okay, that is a lot of computers and a lot of travel time if something breaks. So how do we become more efficient in, 1, preventing issues, or 2, if an issue does occur, how to fix it quickly and effectively with a minimal amount of downtime without profit loss, etc. Okay. And that all comes by how do you put in, you have to put in some proactive time in there to say, what can we do to prevent issues before they occur? And like I said, the system, the little penalty box system that I had mentioned, may be a very perfectly legitimate way of doing so.
Right, to be proactive.
But you have to think about it. You have to go, is that something I want to do? Is that something that, if it costs me 3 or 4 hours of consulting time to put on my core router or my edge device or something like that, and we test it a couple times and it works and it costs that, is it worth that now on Saturday I don't have to deal with it? I don't know. Maybe.
Time is money.
Yeah, time is money,
And upset customers because of one individual is money.
Right. So, that's the question. I mean, you said you lost one customer. Would that customer within 3 or 4 months paid back the time that you spent on a consultant maybe, or paid back the time that you put in to put that a system in there that would have prevented the issue before it occurred? Even if it pissed off that particular customer, hey, that happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you have to control your network in such a way that you can handle that. And there's only so much you can do at any particular given time.
Exactly. most cases, you're a one-man show.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if you're a small business, you have those issues of, what is my time? My time's to do installs, all that kind of stuff. You don't have time to sit there and go, one thing, you don't have time to sit there and go, how can I market? Where can I find marketing places, etc. All that kind of good stuff. So those are the issues that we have. And this is a business issue, but I will tell everybody right now, more time proactively that you can put into your business, it shouldn't be wasted. It's not wasted time.
Never.
Yeah.
No. Nope. Well, if there's any other thing, I think we've exhausted this topic, and very, very insightful. I appreciate your guru-ness on talking to us about peer-to-peer and how to detect and how to possibly mitigate it. If you guys want some consulting time with Dennis, he's available, I'm sure, to help you out. And matter of fact, after the show, I'm going to be talking to him about touch.
I understand.
But with that, we'll wrap up the show unless you got something else, Dennis.
Nope, I think we're good.
All right, well, thanks again, and we'll look forward to talking to you all again next week on ISP Radio.
Thank you for listening to ISP Radio. We hope you've gained new insights and additional wisdom in our industry as well as your business. Please remember to visit our show sponsors via the links on ispradio.com. If you're interested in becoming a show sponsor, contact us at sales@ispradio.com. Now go out there and push those packets as fast as you can. Good luck and Godspeed.